Last night at this hour, we were waiting for an explosion at the Arkema chemical plant in Crosby, Texas, just northeast of Houston. That plant has been flooded and without power since Sunday when its backup generators were swamped, which meant they lost the ability to keep their chemicals refrigerated. Because of the chemicals they use there, they produce liquid organic peroxides. There's a risk of spontaneous chemical reaction if they're not kept cold, which means fire or explosion. And last night, just before 1 in the morning local time, the explosions came and the fire and a 30 to 40 foot plume of black smoke. But now, tonight at this hour, we're waiting for more explosions, more fire. This was the Arkema chemical plant this morning. What you see burning there, we're told, is the remains of one container of these chemicals. There are 8 more of those on site, and the company says they fully expect all 8 remaining containers to explode and burn as well. A 1.5-mile radius around the plant remains evacuated, and the company says until the floodwaters recede, there's little they can do but wait for the rest of the containers to explode and the chemicals to burn off. This is the plant this evening, just a couple hours ago. Now, as you can see, the fire is out for now, but again, we're waiting for 8 more of those containers to go. We're also waiting for some clarity on exactly what kind of danger is posed by the smoke from last night's chemical fire and the additional fires that we're still expecting. This morning, the head of the Federal Emergency Management Agency appeared to suggest that the smoke was so dangerous that it was the reason for the entire evacuation. Meanwhile, local officials and Arkema executives sent, well, let's call them mixed signals.
The bottom line is that we do what's called plume modeling, and that's what we base a lot of the evacuations on. And so, by all means, yes, the plume is incredibly dangerous.
What does it mean for people's health? You don't want to stand in the smoke, do you? So the sheriff says it's like a campfire. It's hydrocarbons burning. There's a lot of things made up of hydrocarbons. So
the things burning there are no more dangerous than a campfire?
Yeah, I did not say that, sir.
To people's health. I mean,
right. You don't want to inhale smoke. Okay, I mean, that's plain and simple.
Can you say the fumes are non-toxic, or you're just not so sure?
They're noxious, certainly. The toxicity of the fume, you mean the smoke? I mean, it's, I don't know the composition of the smoke, but it's certainly noxious.
You're not going to say that they're non-toxic, correct? Are you going to say they're non-toxic or you're not? Yes or no? I think it's a pretty important,
I mean, the smoke is noxious. Its toxicity is, yeah, it's a relative thing.
It's a relative thing. It's noxious. It's smoke. You don't want to breathe it in. And look, in the middle of a disaster, things are definitely sometimes confusing. Wires definitely get crossed. And I should tell you that today the EPA tested the air in Crosby, Texas, and reported that there were no concerns regarding toxic materials. The head of FEMA later said that he would defer to the officials on the ground. But one thing that might help us get a little more specificity on just how toxic that smoke is if we knew exactly what is in that plant and how much of it there is. But that is information that you are not allowed to know in the state of Texas. Not since a massive fertilizer plant explosion in the town of West Texas in 2013. After that ammonium nitrate blast, which leveled a good chunk of that town and killed 15 people, Texas made just one change to its rules about chemical storage. What those chemicals were and where they were stored would no longer be public information. Which means that when things start exploding, like they are right now at the Arkema plant, the people of Texas are asked to trust that companies and state officials are telling them the truth about what's happening and what the danger is. Now, if you lived near this Arkema plant, would you trust the state officials? And the same state officials, meaning that whose only response to a previous chemical plant explosion was to hide information from the public about what chemicals are spewing into the air. Fortunately, there are people who are trying to get that information, who are trying to basically fact-check the authorities. Last night, Rachel spoke with Houston Chronicle data reporter Matt Dempsey, who wrote an amazing series of articles last year about the dangers of Texas's chemical plants. Mr. Dempsey asked Arkema yesterday to hand over the latest inventory of chemicals at its Crosby plant, and Arkema said no. But today, Arkema said yes. They said they will give Matt Dempsey that inventory. Persistence pays off. And joining me now is Matt Dempsey, data reporter for the Houston Chronicle's investigations team. So, Mr. Dempsey, thank you so much for being here this evening. And I guess I'll just ask you the obvious question. Has Arkema handed over their chemical inventory to you?
They handed over something. It was not what I asked for. They gave me a list of chemicals, just a straight list of the names of the chemicals. I don't have anything about how much of each chemical. I don't have the chemical index code that I can use to research more about the chemicals. I don't know what kind of containers they're in. I don't know where those chemicals are located on the facility.
So if you're somebody who lives near that Arkema plant, who is it that you're supposed to trust and believe to tell you that the air near your home is safe to breathe when you're allowed to come back?
That's a good question. So the EPA, like you said in the run-up, has done some air testing, and I think that's usually what happens is the fire marshal's office or local authorities will have set up some air monitoring immediately after. I think it's good that the EPA did. But honestly, from the people I talked to at Crosby today, there's a lot of concerns about what's in it, what's in the smoke. Is the radius of that 1.5 miles far enough? There is rampant rumor mongering all over Crosby about whether things are being done correctly or not. There's a lot of concern about information just not getting spread out to the public very much.
And let's talk about that law. So Texas passed a law after that 2013 explosion that spewed chemicals into the air that said the public is not allowed to know what chemicals are in the plants that are near their homes. Does that mean that even if, for instance, health effects were to happen, let's say a year down the road, could people then in a lawsuit potentially discover, through the discovery process, what is in the air?
I imagine they should be able to discover it in a court process. But honestly, in some court cases that we looked at when we were doing the series that you had talked about, there were cases where companies said they just wouldn't provide it. They wouldn't provide specific information. In fact, there was one case where a worker got pretty severely burned. My colleague Susan Carroll wrote this piece, and they sued and they tried to get all sorts of information. Nobody investigated it, or very little investigations was done. The CSB didn't go there at all. The EPA tried to do an investigation, did not get very far with the company involved. So honestly, even when it causes health damages to the public or to individuals, it can still be difficult to get that information. And just to be clear, Texas didn't pass a law. Governor Abbott, when he was Attorney General, his office made a ruling change. Essentially, they sent out a letter to everybody saying that a ruling saying that we're not going to provide, the state is no longer going to provide this information to the public.
So very quickly, does that mean that, have you seen any evidence of maybe second thoughts that maybe Texas lawmakers might want to actually pass a law that changes that?
I haven't seen any second thoughts. Let's put it this way. After the LaPorte incident, there was a DuPont incident at a plant in LaPorte where 4 workers died from a methyl mercaptan leak. That did not inspire any massive changes in the right to know laws in the state of Texas. Our chemical series, that eight-part series you mentioned, inspired no change by the legislature on right to know laws in the state of Texas.
Wow. So basically, if you're a homeowner in Texas and you live near a chemical plant, you just have to take your chances and trust the company. Interesting. Matt Dempsey.
Well, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, I said, well, Governor Abbott said in his campaign that people could just drive around and ask chemical plants for what they want.
Well, there you go. That's a perfect solution. Matt Dempsey, data reporter on the Houston Chronicle's investigations team. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you. And the Trump administration, meanwhile, is signaling that the president is about to fulfill a campaign promise, which would be devastating for some of the most vulnerable people in this country. But at least he's really torn about it, right? More on that ahead.